Welcome to Interviews with Writers, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of storytelling, creativity, and the craft of writing. I'm your host, Malissa the Writer, and each week we sit down with authors from all genres to explore their journeys, challenges, and the stories behind their stories. Whether you're a writer or reader, or simply someone who loves a good conversation, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Greetings and welcome to Interviews with Writers, where we discuss storytelling, the writing process, and diverse forms of genres and styles. I'm your host, Melissa the Writer, and today I'm joined here with author and Zora Neale Hurston scholar, Rae Chesny. Welcome, Rae, and thank you so much for being on our first episode.
Oh, I didn't know it was the first. Thank you for having me.
The first, of course, of course. So glad you're able to join us. Now, on this podcast, we're going to discuss the different forms of writing. So I have a list of questions. And my first one is, of course, what first got you interested in writing?
As long as I can remember, I had to be second grade. I love to tell stories. And I remember being very young and watching my older sister and my mother consume like these tomes of books. I'm
Mhm.
like, these things are huge. And they would be so enraptured with the storylines. And I think a lot of people would probably think, like, oh, I want to read like that too, or reading is cool. But for me, I was like, I want to write something so engaging. I want to learn how to tell stories at that level where people will spend a day reading or hearing my stories. And so it started really young. I remember my granddad used to pick me up from elementary school and he would ask, like, what happened in school today? And I would make up all of these elaborate stories, dragons flying around the room and setting my teacher's hair on fire. And like his question might have been, do you have homework today? And I'm like, this is not only am I not going to directly answer you about homework, I'm going to give you some entertainment with it. And he
Right.
always just really was kind and patient in listening to those stories. And I think that's probably my best memory of starting to tell stories with my granddad.
Okay. How do you begin to start a story? What is that process like?
Yeah, so it's different for every story. Zora's Garden, which is behind me, actually my son, he was the true inspiration for Zora's Garden because we had started a garden during the pandemic. And at that time, I had already been researching Zora. So he came up at 4. He was like, we should call this Zora's Garden.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, I love that. And we would tell stories in the garden. And he asked me one day, do I think that Zora told her mother, Miss Lucy, stories in their garden? And I was kind of like, oh, I imagine so. And so that, like, the inspiration struck just organically through conversation with my son and setting and some of the things I knew about Zora. But sometimes it's a little bit more work to find that inspiration, especially beyond children's books. I can probably come up with a children's book a day if I wanted to. But longer form writing.
Let me ask you a question. Sorry to interrupt you. What are some children's stories that haven't been told that you think should be told?
Well, if I tell you,
Well,
somebody might take my idea, but even with Zora, I have some ideas for some stories, really focusing on her as a folklorist. But I love imagining Zora as a child. I think there's something really special about imagining these icons and historic figures as true children, being curious and precocious and just really, trying to figure out the world. Because I think often, and we kind of do it to our kids now, where we want them to think about, well, when they grow up, and we miss the beauty of who they are now at this young age. Like, I'm always so enamored and amazed at my own son. So I'm like, just his word choice, the way that he perceives things, I think is something very special. I know that there's lots of disparity still with the diversity in children's books. And often when we're talking about the diversity, we're thinking about the appearance piece of diversity, skin color, for example, nationality, regionality, but even diversity when you talk about what roles can girls have
mm,
as a protagonist. Stories with boys, little black and brown boys, and what can they be and what can they do. And I know even with my son Cam, we read chapter books as his bedtime stories. I've learned that mom hack. Close your eyes and imagine. Doesn't have any pictures. Close your eyes and imagine. That gets them to sleep. But we've noticed like there's this trend where there's more books about girls now, and we have to dig a little harder for the books with brown and black little boys as protagonists, to keep him engaged. So I think there's lots of stories to be written for our children, but I also caution because people think like writing children's books are cute, and they are. But it costs some money. If you're self-publishing, it costs some money. If you're traditionally publishing, it costs some time. And it still costs you money because you get royalties. But it is truly a business. And I think it's a talent because to be able to hold children's attention, the children and the elders, they ain't gonna pull no punches. If they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't.
Oh, they don't have time. They don't have time. And now, how does your writing transition from just a thought or an idea to a draft and then a rewrite until it's published? What is that? What do those stages look like for you?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. And coming up with the story is really fun. I do a lot of brainstorming on my notes app on my phone or post-it notes, which was a strategy of a gift given to me by Miss Tina McElroy Ansa, who, I mean, whoo, Miss Tina, legendary, legendary. She was like, just write post-it. She was like, because when you look at the full page, it can be really intimidating. So as ideas pop up, just write on post-it notes. So post-it notes are a strategy I use. Notes app is a strategy I use when I'm talking about just coming up with the ideas. And it's fun. There's another software called Scrivener that I've been playing around with. And it's like a digital version, an on-screen version of post-it notes. They have this functionality where you can add thoughts and move them around and organize them. Recently, I've been trying to get a little bit more away from the computer though, because for work, it's a lot of screen fatigue. It's a lot of screen fatigue. And there is something special, I think, about putting pen to paper. Moving into the draft, something, I think it was Jordan Peele who said it. His first draft is shoveling the sand into the box so he can build sandcastles later or something to that effect. And I love that analogy for writing because we often are comparing our very rough, messy rough drafts to like a Zora Neale Hurston's polished, final published book. And I always like to remind myself and anybody that I'm supporting with getting a story out, it takes a person to write a story, it takes a team to publish a book. So
Mm.
even for me in a draft, I have to have my trusted counsel who understand that writing a story, writing a book, it is truly a process and it goes through rounds. One of the things crafting right now is really huge for me in understanding the intensity and the level of discipline, right? Because the coming up with the ideas and be like, oh, I'm gonna write a book. That's the fun part. And you can get really in the weeds. You can stay in the weeds with that. But then once you have to revise and edit, that is where the discipline kicks in.
Yes.
You're like,
Yes.
yes, like rounds and even short stories. And I feel like it's interesting because with children's books and short stories, brevity, you have to have brevity, right? But that brevity means that you have to do something really well in a few words, which is challenging. So that craft and be like, oh, I really don't need this or this is redundant. And that's good for longer form, but even in short form, you see how important the discipline is.
Editing is like a writer's best and worst nightmare because you know what I mean? Because it's the worst because you have to keep doing it. Like a minimum. I remember we talked about this off camera, but I just finished writing like the first draft of my screenplay and I'm going in the second draft and I already know I'll probably do a minimum of three.
Yeah.
Minimum of three before I send it to be copyrighted. And as it's being copyrighted, I'm still going to probably do three more run throughs because that is the level of detail that it takes. However, you love it because once you finish, it's like, all right, that's it. Any more touching and it's gonna mess up. It's gonna break. So
Yeah.
editing is like a writer's worst and best friend.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it can be something that causes so much anxiety
Um,
saying I'm finished and I'm going to release essentially my baby. Any viewers who don't know this, are us writers, like Erica Badu said, we artists and we real sensitive. Oh, my fellow Pisces, we real sensitive about our stuff. And it is, you are putting a piece of your heart out in the world. And a lot of times if you're not a writer, you don't know how many steps and what the process is. And if you're in traditional publishing, then you have the team and they're looking at it, and the editor might come back and say, nope, cut this out. If you want to publish, cut that out, cut this out, or it doesn't flow. And the experience of being a writer is just a really interesting and unique experience.
Very, very, very. Speaking of other writers, what writers have inspired you or authors?
Of course, Zora.
Tell
First,
me.
Zora. And the thing about Zora for me, especially with our very personal relationship, is that in addition to just being a master, a genius at storytelling, her intentionality behind how and why she told stories was so beautiful. But for me, what's really special about Zora and our relationship is truly being able to see how she lived as a writer and what her human experience was, right? Because we think, oh, you're an icon, your books, Herod the Great, The Life of Herod the Great, which Zora spent 14 years working on, more than 14 years working on this book. And one of her last letters, and I think it might be the last known letter, January 16th, 1959, she was begging Harper Brothers to publish The Life of Herod the Great. And so seeing the moments in which maybe even she accomplished something, but it wasn't how she wanted to accomplish it. All of her published books, she said she wished she had another chance to write them all over again. She was never pleased. Yeah, she was never pleased with her writing. So understanding that sensitivity as an artist, that perfectionism as an artist, I appreciate seeing not only her experience with the writing, but just truly how she lived and some of her trials and tribulations. And of course, there are so many daughters and sons of Zora Neale Hurston, but just thinking about a little bit wider, I can give you a few other writers who just like really inspire me. Jamila Minix, she wrote this book, Moonrise over New Jessup. And yeah, it's actually up here on my shelf. I wrote her this whole love letter on social media because I hadn't read something that felt so resonant and in conversation with Zora like that. I've never read anything at that level that felt that amazing. So Jamila is one of my top writers. Amani Perry, I'm just really inspired by her because she's deeply into ancestral work too with her scholarship. Lorraine Hansberry, even though I don't write plays, just being really interested in the form and knowing some of her life struggles, very, very. Fan of Britt Bennett, fan of course, Dr. Kendi. I know I'm forgetting some. Trelawney Michelle, who's my Zora twin, a huge fan of hers. And I'm always excited to just be exposed to new writers. I like to read Kennedy Ryan, her romance novels. Like Kennedy has changed the game on what it is to be a romance writer. Her stories have really interesting narratives, and you'd be like, yeah, Kennedy did her research on this.
One of my girlfriends, Ryan, told me about her, I believe, about one
I
of her.
know, Ryan. Yeah.
All
Ryan
right.
connected us, so shouts out to Ryan.
So Ryan, thanks, Ryan. Speaking of books, tell us about your book, Zora's Garden.
Yeah, so Zora's Garden, it is a blend of fact and fiction from my own research, and then imagining Zora as a little girl learning how to tell stories. And so it's a garden analogy. She's actually physically gardening, but she's really starting to compare storytelling to gardening via her mother's wisdom.
Okay.
And there's so much intentionality in that. Like my favorite phrase, spoiler alert, is Zora asked her mom, Miss Lucy, in the book, well, what's the sun for a story? Right? Of course, you think of a garden, you need sun to make your plants grow. You need that light. And so Miss Lucy, she's like, I don't really know. And Zora comes up with the fact that the sun is the storyteller because storytellers shine on
Mm.
a story for everybody to see. And I don't know, it's interesting because it's really sacred. When I read the book, I've often been told that it doesn't sound like it's just me reading it.
Hmm.
And I and I absolutely love that because in honor of Zora, additionally, I kept vernacular. She
Okay.
wrote in dialect and vernacular and she's still criticized for it, but really criticized in her lifetime for it. So in the book, Miss Lucy is very intentional that she is the one talking in dialect, but is sharing this wisdom with her daughter who is not.
Okay. Okay.
But I can tell you, mad respect for Zora because just writing a children's book, trying to do phonetic spelling is an undertaking. She was writing whole novels.
What was it like writing in a different vernacular? Like, how different was that? And still, even then, for children to understand, because I'm sure that's a different level of understanding.
No. So it's funny because I've had children cry and they'll say like, oh, my great grandmother, which they might call Gigi, or my Mima, like that's how she talks, right? Or that's how she talk. So it's interesting because the way that we naturally talk, many, many generations, it has been trained out of us and it has been seen as derogatory, where that's one of the things Zora gives us. Like, first off, our folks was kidnapped and brought over here. They didn't go to school. We had to blend our native languages, our native tongues with English, but also other tribal languages, because of course they would kidnap um, folks from different tribes, and you could be in one of the slave dungeons, which I've been in, some of them in Ghana, for months on end. So you even can't communicate with the person that's right next to you, crowded in to these barracks in this very uncomfortable way, but you don't speak the same language. So our ancestral voices that come through us are such a blend of numerous languages, and to be able to craft that and develop that with no training itself is a gift. I find the first book that I ever read by Zora was Barracoon, and it supported me greatly in writing Zora's Garden, because I remember when I first opened up the book, and at that time I had researched Zora for about a year, and then I read Barracoon, and it had just come out. And at first I said, I don't know what any of this is. I don't know what not Nan, one word, I don't know what this says. And then I closed my eyes and I thought, okay, well, Zora was from Florida, and my grandfather was from Mississippi. He kept his accent all of his life. And so I closed my eyes and I thought of his voice, the twang, everything. And when I opened my eyes, it was like music on the page. So a lot of times, and it's a little bit more difficult, it's the consistency of moving through the writing phase of it. But I find like reading and hearing it and speaking it, that's what's more natural to us. We've just been indoctrinated to believe that our native tongue, the ways that we develop language, are improper, which is derogatory as hell.
Agreed. Agreed. Do you also use visuals when you write too? Is that included in your process?
Sometimes, with Zora's Garden, I was actually really lucky. I hadn't thought about this in quite a while because it was published in the summer of 2022, but I had the book idea originally in 2021, and I'm a little spoiled because I can publish a children's book in like 12 weeks, like from idea to have it in hand. But I wasn't sure. I was like really nervous about writing Zora's Garden, especially because it's a genre that apparently doesn't exist anymore. I was told that it blending fact and fiction. I was like, well, we're gonna bring that back because I think that is wonderful to be able to cherry pick what's fact versus fiction, especially with the littles. I had the idea in 2021 and I was shying away from publishing it because I had published other books, and I was like, kind of, do I want to do a children's book? Do I want to like work on something longer form? Like, what's up? Should I be doing something different? And it was crazy because I had sketched out what I wanted Zora's face, like as a kid, to look like. with all of these flowers and stuff around it. And then I walked into a coffee shop in a town local to me, and it had like the flowers and everything arranged just like the sketch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was like, I like to say Zora was very bold and loud when she was here. She definitely was bold and loud as an ancestor because she was like, girl, you're gonna write this book.
Hey,
Yeah, and I like started crying in the middle of the coffee shop because I was like, what are the chances that this would happen? And it was interesting because it happened. My best friend passed away in 2019 unexpectedly. And it was on the day of that she died that I saw this in a coffee shop. So I was like, oh, y'all up there having conversations about me.
that's a lot. That's a
It
lot.
is. It
I,
is.
I do find sometimes when I think of a story, um, if I'm still toying with the idea, some type of confirmation will come. And that's when I know, like, okay, run with it until it can't run anymore and see what you can do. And usually when I get those confirmations, I can run with the story and, do,
Yeah. It's
do.
just like getting permission, right? Like you just need the permission to do it. It's already in you. You just need the permission. And I have to say, you asked about favorite writers. I am obsessed with Sandra Cisneros. And I really feel like, sis, yes, A House on Mango Street, but her collection of work, A House of My Own. I was like, oh, Sandra is the Mexican Zora. And I actually like reached out to her team and I was like, listen, for my birthday, Cassandra sent me a signed copy of this, and they didn't have any in stock, but she did send me a signed House on Mango Street,
Oh,
which
nice.
was wild. But I bring up Sandra Cisneros because I believe it was her who said this. Um, this quote is a quote to the effect of like every writer must realize that there's a council of ancestors sitting on the cloud assisting them.
Mm,
And I truly believe that like it's such an ancestral thing because where do the stories come from? We always want to pinpoint, well, where do your ideas come from? You don't know. Like we don't know. It'd be the most random stuff, but it's messages and downloads and just beautiful happenings that after a while it can't be a coincidence. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. It can't be a coincidence. Um, how do you determine which story to tell? I told my way. How do you determine which story to tell?
Oh, it's hard. Even even my literary agent, I sent her, I think it was about a month or two ago, because she's like, we're ready to start pitching you before January. And that, like, the little kid in me is so impatient, right? And I want to rush to the end. And I'm to the point now that I'm finally falling in love with divine timing. Like, these things take time. And so, number one, having her support and being like, okay, let's think through strategy. Because if you're writing, it's fine to just write, right? So most people think like, oh, well, I'm writing, I have to do something with my writing. You don't have to do anything with your writing. You're still a writer. But when we talk about publishing, like publishing is a business.
It is.
It is truly a business. And for Zora's Garden, it's interesting because like my Hurston family, they have copies of Zora's Garden. This is Zora's blood relatives. Most of the Zora scholars, they have Zora's Garden. People that I admire, their children have, my heroes, they have it. And so we talk about the strategy, like Zora's Garden was one of the ways that I got to work with the Zora Neale Hurston Trust, that introduction was even made. And so sometimes it can be really deceptive because even more so than deciding which story to tell, it's like, why am I telling this story?
Why? The why.
And you don't always know. Because I can imagine this little children's book would have you truly don't always know because some things that you think are going to pop off, they don't, right? But that's where the intentionality comes. And so I don't know. I'm honestly still navigating that. Which story to tell, when, and how.
Anytime, and this might just be me. Anytime I try to purposefully think of a story, I would say 6 times out of 10 it doesn't work out.
Really?
Doesn't It doesn't work out. I am sometimes able to pull it off though, but I think that's because I'm just an experienced writer. I mean, I've been doing freelance for almost like 20 years. So every now and then it's like, all right, move on. But just to think of a story without being assigned one by my editors, it's like, okay.
And I love that. Like, I've not had the experience of someone assigning me a story and giving like, these are the specifications of the story, and this is the deadline. So I'm more of a free fall writer, if you will. So I appreciate the journalists, the experienced writers who'd be like, I'm gonna get this story out one way or another, one way or another.
Now you know what the crazy thing is in high school, you know how they used to roll the TV down the hallway and it was career week or job whatever to introduce us to careers, and they had it set up all over my school, Peterson, and they showed this video of a newsroom and
Mm.
nobody was dressed up. I'm laid back. I'm pretty laid back. I mean, I'm fun, but I'm laid back too. Like I don't want to do anything, you know, too much. And I just remember them always pushing like, whatever job you get, you have to do it forever. So in my mind, I'm like, you gotta pick something cool forever.
You get jumped in, you gotta get jumped in and jumped out.
With the video of a newsroom, I was like, and they were in pants. People were walking around, people were coming in and out. They were in their cubicle, writing. They got to interview people, go places. I'm like, that's me.
I
That's
love that.
it. So being able to do freelance, it it is it's like a dream come true. Of course, sometimes it's annoying, right? Like any job anybody has. Anybody that says, I love my job all the time, they're lying. At some point, it is like, I want a break. Or I'm just
Maybe they can compartmentalize very well, because oftentimes it's not the job, it's like different factors
a
of the
break.
job, which
Like
really don't be your core job.
that, that's exactly what it is. Interviewing, when you get to write for, on your own, free will right that you talked about. When you
Yeah.
get to do that, when I do that on my own, it's like a flower opening. When
Yeah.
I have to interview someone else, um, that requires them setting a time, me setting a time, me being prepped for that with my questions, my recorder, my camera, or meet a photographer if they send one, making sure that I confirm all the information. I mean, the little stuff that we talked about as far as like spelling their name correctly, where's this business
Yeah.
located, where's this website, did they say this or that? Because my recorder didn't really pick it up. Like those details are so much faster, but even though it can be challenging, it does help me with my writing for my
Okay.
own personal writing. I try to connect the dots because at first I was like, it's taking me away from my writing, but I'm like, sis, it's still writing.
It's still writing. Yeah.
This somebody's paying you for this. You're not getting paid for the stuff you're doing on your own. Someone's paying you.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
you can get your own experience. What are we talking about? So I think both types of writing are they're different, but they still help with writing. So anyone out there who's listening, if you're like, I want to write a book or I want to do this, and you're just doing freelance, trust me, my love, trust me, my sweet love. You are practicing for that. Believe me, believe us, right?
Yeah.
Believe
And
us.
I mean, just like you said, it's so interesting because it's not that one is better than the other. It's just different experiences. And that is being a writer by nature, being an artist by nature. Our experiences inform our art if we let it. And just like confession, even for me, in my role now, like I meet with the executives at HarperCollins regularly. I talk to them regularly on the phone. We work together on Zora's legacy. And even you just never know what's going to happen. So we think about writing, the stories that you tell and the experiences that you share, that contributes to your writing practice. Getting in meetings to be able to pitch a sponsor to contribute to something, that is still storytelling. And that is one of my big focuses for Zora's Garden, because oftentimes We want people to jump right into the physicality of writing, the discipline of writing. And it's like, listen, master storytelling and work at the craft of storytelling first, and that will serve you too, once you get to the page. And so I never want anybody to discredit themselves and will think like, oh, I'm not a storyteller. When you call your girls and you tell them what happened on your date or what happened with your kids, what happened at work, like that's storytelling. Man, when you call your friends or y'all playing some sports or just hanging out and talking about life, like you're still exchanging stories. And that piece is really important to me because it is our ancestral practice as people of color to have the oral tradition. All right. And they that's one of the things like they tried to take from us. They would ban preaching, they would ban storytelling, they would ban you speaking in your native tongue. And that is how valuable it is. Anytime somebody tell you can't do something, that's because it's
And
really valuable.
there's power behind it. There's power behind it. There's power behind storytelling and getting
Yeah.
people to think new ways. I think that's one of the things I also love about writing is the power behind it, and to get people to put themselves in different situations, and different perspectives, have a new idea on something that hasn't even been thought of, uh, because of a scenery, which is one of the reasons why I really love sci-fi, because I think the visuals behind sci-fi help enhance a story. It can really enhance a story. Okay, last question. What's going on with the Zora Summit?
Yes, I have the privilege, the honor of helping the Hurston family via the Zora Neale Hurston Trust produce their very first event to honor and celebrate Zora Neale Hurston. And it is the Zora Neale Hurston Summit. The way that I pitch it is that it's an upscale family reunion where the general public gets to come be a part of Zora's extended family for a weekend. And for the first time ever in history, we'll be able to celebrate her life, legacy, and work alongside the Hurstons themselves. And right now, we got about 52 Hurstons who have RSVP. Yeah, to be there. Yeah, to be there is going to be a really big deal happening January 31st and February 1st, 2025 on Barnard College's campus, which happens to be Zora's alma mater. She was their first Black student. She enrolled in September 1925. And the interesting thing about Barnard is it's right down the street from Harlem. And so we get to step into history with this summit. Even our breakout sessions, you will be having and participating in breakout sessions in the same building that Zora would have taken classes in.
Wow.
Yes,
Wow. I've actually been to Harlem. Harlem is a vibe.
Harlem is a vibe.
A vibe.
It is.
A vibe. Amazing. I know personally, and I can testify, you've been working extremely hard along with the family to prepare for this summit. And I know it's going to be exciting. I was trying to see with my calendar, but my eyesight is getting so bad. I think is it 3 weeks away?
Yes, 3 weeks away. So we should let them know at the time of recording. We're actually recording on Zora's birthday, which is very significant. And I'm just so excited. I often say I'm probably going to cry the entire summit because I'm so deeply happy that she is getting her flowers in this way. A lot of times, and just like we talked about different types of writing, there are different types of events. There are quite a few events that honor Zora, but like this is Zora overload. This is Zora's party. So every session, every main stage talk, even in the title, it has Zora's name or the name of one of her works. So this is where you come if you want to know about Zora, learn more about Zora, celebrate her. We have 74 speakers.
Oh, wow.
We not only have 74 speakers, this is a combination of main stage speakers, breakout session speakers. On top of that, we also have a children's festival happening in tandem with the summit
Oh,
on February 1st. And just the intentionality behind how this summit has been designed is so beautiful. My trustees, who are relatives of Zora's, surprised me by appointing my son, who just turned 8 on Sunday, as a children's ambassador for the trust. and he's the first ever children's ambassador for the Zora Neale Hurston Trust. And it's so sweet. They have their own little relationship. I just found out from his coach that he actually quizzes his classmates on Zora facts, like where was her last house, what city and state. He can tell you her birthday. And so he actually has been attending meetings. He's the one who okays what activities are going to happen or asks for adjustments. And I think like that was really important because to be able to center the perspective of a child to provide programming for other children. He had a homework assignment yesterday, which you'll appreciate as an educator. And he had to set goals for the school year. So he had to set one goal and he had to say one hope. And his hope was that at least 400 people come to the summit and at least 50 kids come to the children's festival. And there's never been a Zora Neale Hurston Children's Festival before, which is even more significant because I want to be my son when I grow up, to be to be honest. He like tell him he is that one. Like I'm like, listen, I'm just here for legal purposes. He's raising himself. He is truly raising himself. I just got to transport him and make sure he's fed, but he's raising himself otherwise. Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, who will be at the summit, is adapting 6 of Zora's works into children's literature, and we're 3 in right now. So we have Magnolia Flower, which came out first, The Making of Butterflies, which came out next, and then Barracoon adapted for young readers. And so even that, the intentionality and how it's worked for him as he's been planning this, he was able to meet Dr. Kendi and ride around in his blacked out Escalade in Eatonville, in Zora's hometown, in January, this past January 2024. And Dr. Kendi was like, oh, Cameron's over the summit. Like, yeah, I can swing by.
Oh,
To see
wow.
what Cameron has planned. And so that, like that idea of an upscale family reunion, it really will be not only the Hurstons as a family reunion, but all of the scholars, all of the writers and artists and fans and devotees who truly love and honor Zora, being able to come and celebrate her, but also be in space with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. You had that community together.
Yes, yes, and intergenerational too, which I really, really love. You probably want to know. Some of our speakers and some of like what's happening. Yeah, because people have been so patient. And I think like that understanding of family reunion. I don't know if your family like this, but my family be like that. You talk to them 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and it's like, what's happening for Thanksgiving? Oh, nothing. 2 days before Thanksgiving. All right, we having a whole thing dinner. We know what that means when we say family reunion. It's a potluck of ideas, resources, gifts, and just working together to make this happen for Zora. But some of our speakers, when we talk about what will they be talking about and who they are, I mentioned Dr. Kendi. He'll be talking about the adaptations and just like his intentionality behind adapting Zora's works into children's literature. But then Zora was an initiate of voodoo. So we talk about authentically honoring her and honoring that piece of her legacy and her life. Yeye Louisa Tish, who wrote Jambalaya, will be there doing a true grounding ceremony on Saturday. She'll also attend on Friday, but she'll be there on Saturday to call Zora into the space and honor her spiritually. Mara Brock Akil is coming out. Yes, creator of Girlfriends. I mean,
Wow.
ooh, television film extraordinaire Mara Brock Akil loves Zora, and she'll be there in conversation with Dr. Kendi. We also have Dr. Sabrina Thomas, which I'm really excited about. This is a little known fact. Not many people know about this, but in
Okay.
the 40s, Zora worked with her friend Sarah Lee Creech, who was a white lady, to create the first anthropologically correct Black baby doll.
Oh, wow.
She couldn't, and we talking Jim Crow, right? This is Jim Crow era. So
Yeah.
she's friends with this white woman in the South. They're in Belgrade, Florida. And she's friends with Sarah Lee and also Sarah Lee's mother. And at this time, so I didn't show you, but here at the Great, this is the book. It's out today. She's using their library to do some of the research on Harriet, but she's also helping Sarah Lee with this doll, and she's connecting Sarah Lee to all the Black thought leaders
Okay.
that she needs to essentially sign off on this dial so that it can go into production. And shouts out to Sarah Lee for being intentional, but Zora actually made it academic because she added that anthropologically correct Black baby dial. We ain't
Okay.
doing a baby dial. This is anthropologically correct. And so in 1951, the Ideal Company produced this dial named the Sarah Lee dial. And I mean, like, Zora was even telling her, like, you need to talk to Mary McLeod Bethune. She cool with Eleanor Roosevelt. And Sarah Lee was able to go have tea with Eleanor Roosevelt. I think Zora, if I'm not mistaken, Zora was invited, but she was like, I don't got no winter coat to be going to DC. I'm gonna stay down here in Florida. But she's also connecting her to the president of Howard, Mordecai Johnson at the time. She's like, these are the Black thought leaders you need to really get this off the ground. And they did. So 1951, Ideal Company sells it. I've been able to find like ads and newspaper clippings on them. Sold at Sears and Roebuck's. Like, it's very sweet. There are children writing Santa Claus asking for a Sarah Lee doll in
Oh,
1950. Yeah. And this Zora worked on it. So when I talk about Dr. Sabrina Thomas, she is an expert on Black dolls. She
wow.
has one of the dolls. She's coming to the summit to give us an exhibit and a presentation about this doll. But then, family reunion, Virginia Lynn Moylan, wrote a book, Zora Neale Hurston, The Final Decades, which is often, people don't talk about Zora after really 1948. A lot of scholars stopped their research at that point. Well, Lynn writes this very important book. Lynn will be at the summit. Well, I connect Lynn and Sabrina.
Okay.
And Lynn is like, oh, well, for about 14 years, I had brunch or breakfast with Sarah Lee bi-weekly for 14 years. And she's like, oh, I have this, I have the measurements for the dial, and I will give them to you for your presentation. Like,
Wow.
so the current is not just about who's speaking, but what they're bringing with them, not just the scholarship, not just the knowledge, not just the talent, but the generosity. 74 people. I thought that we were going to have a much smaller program. But I think out of everybody I talked to, only 2 or 3 people said, like, oh, I can't do it this year, et cetera, et cetera. We have some folks who will be joining virtually. Dr. Imani Perry will be joining virtually. Jamila Minix will be joining virtually. Dr. Deborah G. Plant will be there. She edited Barracoon and The Life of Herod the Great, which The Life of Herod the Great was 4 different manuscripts. There was not a ton of coherence. So to be able to consolidate into one manuscript, beyond me. So Dr. Plant will be there, Carla Kaplan, who collected and edited 600 letters written by Zora. Carla will be there. She'll be doing a talk with Monica Miller, who is the resident Hursonian at Barnard College, who's also the guest curator for the Met exhibit in 1925, which is inspired by Monica's book, Slaves to Fashion, which is inspired by Zora's 1933 or 1934 essay, Characteristics of Negro Expression. Carla and Monica will be in conversation about Zora, and then Carla will be in conversation with Dr. Plant about Herod. And we have, yes,
People get tickets, or what do they need to do to be part of this?
yeah. So thanks to our wonderful, generous sponsors, including Barnard, including our title sponsor, HarperCollins. The event is actually free to the public, but you do have to register. So you want to go to zoranealehurstonsummit.com and make sure that you sign up for general registration. Because Barnard is an old campus, the classrooms for the breakout sessions are fairly small. So once you register general registration, we'll be sending out directly to those people who do register, sign up for breakout sessions.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. People definitely need to sign up. Sign up as soon as possible. This is going to be a great event. I feel like as you were describing it, it made me think for a second. These are like all the pieces of Zora coming together under one roof, if possible. Is that how you feel about it too?
Yeah, I say all the playgrounds were dominated. We trying to celebrate them and shine light on them at the summit. And we've had I mean, even our sponsors, the Zetas, Zora's sorority sisters are coming through. Dr. Stacy NC Grant will be there making remarks. Yeah, yeah. I should do this. As of today, as of right now, how many people do you think have already registered? And we just opened up registration December 27th.
I'm leaning towards, I'm gonna be like Cam, so I'm leaning towards 500.
You almost there, 438.
See?
And we have not. So I appreciate when we talk about family. Hey, family. Thank you for being super patient. We just got, I think we have 3 more speakers to have their actual collateral, and then we will be releasing the official program probably in the next week. I'm pushing to get it out in the next week so you guys can see everything that will be happening. The fact that we have not released that and we have 438 people, they say, listen, cousin, I don't know what's happening, but it sounds good and I'm gonna be there.
Yes, I'm not missing this family reunion. I'm not missing it. I'm not missing it. Well, make sure that you sign up Zora Neale Hurston Summit.com
Got it.
to register, so that you can be part of this fantastic event. And thank you so much, Rae, for being my guest, my first guest on this first episode of Interviews with Writers. I appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully we can have you back soon.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me. And I know this is the first episode, but I know there will be many, many more.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to our first episode of Interviews with Writers. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Your support helps us reach more listeners like you. This episode is also available on YouTube at Interviews with Writers, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at Writers Dialogue for episode updates and guests. And as always, keep reading, keep writing, and I'll catch you next time.